Guilt is one of the most damaging emotions that one can feel. It's one of the lowest vibrations that human can live in. And if you don't learn how to release this soul-sucking emotion from your body, it can be detrimental to you and your life. In this video, I'm going to teach you the 3 steps that you need to know to release guilt so that you can start living your life in higher and more beautiful states. Make sure to watch this video in order. Just don't jump around because these tips are built in order. They build off of each other. So it is important that you watch all of them in sequence. So without further ado, let's get right into step 1. Step 1 is to right the wrongs. Let me be more specific. Right the wrongs that you can, that you have power over. You're probably not going to want to hear this, but this is the work. If your guilt is stemming from a specific event, then you must take responsibility for your part in it. Do not underestimate how relieving it is to take responsibility. There is a very strong power in doing so. And this might make the difference between you harboring guilt for a long time and you finally releasing your guilt. Even if you feel like you did nothing wrong, do not give in to this lower state of being higher than other people. You can feel like you did nothing wrong and you might have actually not done anything wrong, but for some reason you still hurt someone's feelings. You can take responsibility for that. Tell them you are sorry, you apologize for hurting their feeling. That was not your intention, even if you feel like you were in the right. So do not give in to being higher than anyone else. Now, if you can't really think of an event that this guilt is stemming from, in other words, if this is more of like a chronic guilt instead of an acute guilt, something that you specifically stemmed from a specific event, then you can still right the wrong within yourself. It takes going within and asking yourself where this guilt is stemming from. Where is this guilt that I'm harboring and that I'm living with? Where is it coming from? And some examples of righting the wrong within yourself in these situations is just loving yourself more, for example, or just having your own back a little bit more, being more in your own corner. And before I talked about not being higher than anyone else, but you also don't want to be lower than anyone else. So maybe leveling up so you're on an equal playing field with everyone else. So look within yourself and right those wrongs. And there's something powerful that happens when you take responsibility for your actions. I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but when you do so, not only do you make other people feel better, but you start cultivating a sense of empowerment and trust within yourself. And this empowerment and trust is indescribable because it only comes when you take that big action of responsibility for your part. Now you'll notice that I said right the wrongs that you can. So the other side of this equation is you don't want to linger too long on things that you don't have any control or power over. Part of you doing your work in this step, part of righting the wrongs, is surrendering to things that you have no control over. Because if you don't surrender and you don't let go, your only other option is to continue to suffer. So right the wrongs that you can. Both sides of that equation are equally important. Take responsibility for your part and let go of everything else that you have no control over or isn't your part. Okay, moving on to step number 2, which is detox the emotional charge of guilt. So I want you to think of the sensation of guilt. How does it feel in your body? Because at the end of the day, what emotions really are sensations flowing through our body. Sometimes that sensation is pleasant, and other times that sensation really feels painful. And that's the difference between a good emotion or a negative emotion. So in this case, guilt is probably pretty painful for you to feel. Now, I want you to take the logic out of the emotion, but feel it in your body. What is the sensation that you're feeling? Now, that sensation is what I call the charge, the emotional charge. There is the event that took place that caused you to feel guilty, and then there's the emotional charge that is created as a result of what happened. For some of us, we've lived with this emotional charge or this feeling of guilt for so long that we've grown accustomed to it. It's become comfortable, and it's just what we're used to. We're used to living in guilt, and we assume that that's a normal state. And our bodies are just so used to feeling that familiar emotion that our brains have created very strong neural pathways to guilt. So it's not only comfortable, but it's very easy for us to feel guilt. Now, what we're going to do in this step is learn how to detox this emotional charge from our bodies, because the good news is that our bodies can be reprogrammed and our brains are plastic, so we can create new neural pathways to better feeling emotions and kind of erase those highways to guilt in your brain. Now, the big question is, how do we do this? How do we detox the emotional charge of guilt from our bodies? And the answer is, we stop engaging and interacting with it. This requires you to be more vigilant and present throughout your day, so you can really notice when that feeling of guilt starts to come up. Because once you notice what you do when you feel the guilt, most people try and suppress it, or they try and distract themselves from it. Realize that that's still doing something. That's still reacting to the feeling of guilt. What we want to do is allow for that charge to come up, but choose to not interact with it. We don't need to suppress it. We don't need to run away with it. We don't need to do anything about it. We can just let it flow through our body, just like emotions usually do, and just wait for the charge to kind of run out of steam. Now, what happens when you do this, when you stop trying to distract yourself from the guilt, you stop running away with it, and you stop suppressing it, is you allow the guilt to actually come up and out of your body. You allow for the emotional detoxification process to happen. Yes, it might be a little scary, it might be a little painful, and that's okay. There's a really good quote by one of my favorite authors, Michael Singer, and he says, "What's stored with pain comes up with pain." So it's normal if that guilt is coming up, and for the first time you're choosing not to suppress it, that it's a little bit painful. Breathe through it, be present, don't interact with it, relax through it, and allow it all to just come up. Allow that emotional release to happen, because this is the only way you actually can release the emotion from your body. Otherwise, you're going to continue to harbor that pain with you, and your life is going to be more about distracting yourself from what's going in, rather than starting to live in these really high, beautiful states, which is our goal once we detox guilt. Now, I mentioned earlier that we want to reprogram our bodies and our brains, and how we do that is by just doing this process every single time that we feel guilt. We want to retrain our bodies and our brains to stop feeling guilt, stop interacting with guilt, and start moving towards a person that is higher than that is living in a higher vibration. Basically, we want to teach our bodies, we want to tell our bodies and tell our brains that we're not that person anymore. That person that was harboring guilt is a person of the past. The person that we are now is different. And again, you just want to continue this detoxification process every single time you feel guilty. Notice when you feel guilt. That is the biggest step here, because if you can't notice because it's so familiar, then you don't have an opportunity to do this work. Be vigilant, be mindful, be present, and be persistent. It will get easier. With practice, with persistence, this becomes easier and easier and easier until guilt is just so minuscule. It's something that you almost laugh at because it's so not who you are anymore. Now, I do realize that you might be feeling guilty for doing this work, which is funny. It's like guilt inception. And that's why it's so important to do step one, because you have to right the wrongs. That way your conscience can feel good about releasing guilt. So make sure you do step one, and if you do step one thoroughly and take responsibility for your actions, then step two is exactly what you should be doing. You no longer need to harbor guilt. You can start detoxifying. Guys, if you're enjoying this video so far, please just take 2 seconds to support me by hitting the like button and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you so much, and let's move on to step number 3. Step number 3 is to remind yourself who you want to be. Now that we have detoxified and we're consciously releasing this emotional charge of guilt, we have released a bunch of energy that was stored within us for so long. What that means is now we have a room for new energy, and we can replace that old energy of guilt with a new energy of your choosing. And this is the fun part. This step is going to be different for everyone depending on where you are on your healing and personal growth journey. So you can really tailor this to yourself. But ask yourself, what is the next step, the next emotional step that you want to be in? What is the next state that you want to live in, that you have the most access to in your current situation? Don't judge yourself, because this might just be satisfaction. If you are just releasing guilt, maybe the next best step is just satisfaction. Or if you have access to something higher like joy or love or abundance, whatever you want, then let that be your goal. When you really start feeling the guilt leave your body as a result of doing the work from step number 2, start reminding yourself who you want to be, who you want to replace your old energy with. You can also remind yourself who you no longer want to be anymore. This is something I did at the beginning of my personal growth journey. Was I reminded myself that that's not me anymore. That's the old person, and I'm choosing to not be that person anymore. And so now you start reminding yourself who you do want to be, and you do this by, of course, thinking logically, but more importantly, you want to start feeling the feelings that you would when you are in that next step, that next vibrational step, the next state that you want to live in. So it's as simple as choosing the emotion or state that you want to live in. For example, satisfaction or safety or joy. Choose that state and then feel it. Feel the safety, feel the joy, feel just the relief of satisfaction, whatever it is. And the more and more you do this, just like step number 2, the easier it becomes to start feeling these more higher state feelings. When I say climb the vibrational ladder, this is what I mean. You start having access to higher emotions because you're leaving those older, lower vibration emotions, you're letting those go, and you're choosing to climb up higher and higher and higher. Now, how you choose to remind yourself is up to you. You can do this in meditation. You can do this as a visualization. You can do this in journaling. You can make a vision board. You can even make like a little movie, like a little 30-second clip, just with the feelings and the images and the videos of what it would be like to have your new life in this higher state. So be creative with it. Do whatever feels most resonant to you. Continue to practice. And again, you want to be persistent. And this is what's really going to create those new neural pathways in your brain to higher states of being. And one day you're going to get to the point where that highway to guilt is like no longer there. It takes something significant to really feel guilty, but your access to these higher states are like an 8-lane highway that has no traffic. You're just going straight there. Now, this is what I call putting destiny in your own hands. You stop relying on the external events to dictate how you feel, and you start taking emotional responsibility for your inner world. You can do this with any emotion. Yes, this video was focused on guilt, but the idea is still the same. We want to detox the old emotion and start training our bodies to feel the emotion that we wish to feel. Guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then stay tuned for this next video that's coming up over here on how to stop caring about what other people think. If you couple this detoxification of guilt with not caring about what other people think anymore, you're going to be an unstoppable, unrecognizable person. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.